The old mansion loomed on the hill, dark and silent, windows like vacant eyes. The moon hid behind clouds, making the mansion even creepier. Shadows danced around it, whispering secrets.
She had heard the stories. People said it was haunted, that something terrible had happened there. But Sarah didn't believe in ghosts. She loved a good mystery.
Sarah stared up at the mansion. She took a deep breath and approached the house. The iron gate creaked as she pushed it open. The sound echoed in the stillness. Sarah shivered. The air grew colder as she walked toward the mansion. She reached the front door. It was massive and made of dark wood. The handle was cold to the touch. Sarah took a deep breath and turned the knob.
The mansion was a labyrinth of rooms, each corridor twisting and turning into another shadowy space. Each one filled with dusty furniture and forgotten belongings, remnants of a time long past. Sarah wandered from room to room, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, revealing glimpses of the mansion's eerie past. She found a library with shelves upon shelves of books, their spines cracked and pages yellowed with age. A dining room with a long, empty table, set as if awaiting a feast that never came. A music room with a grand piano that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, its keys silent and covered in a thick layer of dust.
As Sarah explored, strange things started to happen. The air grew colder and an unsettling feeling crept over her. A door slammed shut behind her, echoing through the empty halls. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She heard a soft whisper coming from the shadows, a voice just out of reach, sending chills down her spine.
Sarah paused, her heart pounding in her chest, the sound echoing in her ears. She shone her flashlight in the direction of the whisper, but there was nothing there, only the empty darkness staring back at her. She told herself it was just the wind, but the unease gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Sarah found a small study tucked away at the back of the house. It was a room she had never seen before, hidden behind a heavy, ornate door that creaked as she pushed it open. It had a heavy wooden desk and a fireplace that was cold and empty. The air was thick with dust, and the room felt like it had been untouched for years, a forgotten corner of the mansion. On the desk, she found a leather-bound journal. Its cover was worn, and the pages were yellowed with age, hinting at the secrets it held within.
She opened it and began to read. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, as if the writer had been desperate to get his thoughts down on paper. The journal belonged to a man named Malcolm, the former owner of the mansion. His portrait hung on the wall, watching over the room with a stern gaze. He wrote about his life in the house, his hopes and dreams. The early entries were filled with optimism and plans for the future, but then the entries took a dark turn. The handwriting became more frantic, the words more desperate. Malcolm wrote about strange occurrences, shadows moving in the night and whispers that seemed to come from the walls. He described the feeling of being watched, even when he was alone. He wrote about feeling watched, hunted. The sense of dread grew with each entry, as if the walls themselves were closing in on him. He feared for his sanity and his life. Sarah's blood ran cold as she read his words, feeling the same fear that Malcolm had felt. Malcolm's words were filled with terror. He described nights where he couldn't sleep, haunted by the sounds and shadows that surrounded him. He believed that something evil was trapped in the house with him. The mansion, once a place of dreams, had become a prison of nightmares, something that wanted to harm him. Sarah could almost feel the presence Malcolm described, a dark, sinister force lurking in the corners of the room.
A cold hand touched Sarah's shoulder, sending a shiver down her spine. The room was dark, and the air felt heavy with an eerie presence. She screamed and spun around, dropping the journal she had been holding to the floor. The sound of the journal hitting the ground echoed through the silent room. Standing before her was a figure, shrouded in darkness. Its presence was overwhelming, filling the room with a sense of dread. Tall and gaunt, with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness, the figure was terrifying.
The growls echoed in the room, adding to the terror that gripped Sarah.
The figure lunged at Sarah with a sudden, violent movement. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She scrambled to her feet and ran as fast as she could. The figure gave chase, its footsteps echoing behind her. Sarah raced through the mansion, her flashlight beam bouncing wildly, casting erratic shadows on the walls. She could hear the figure's footsteps pounding behind her, growing louder with each passing second. It was gaining on her, its presence growing more menacing with every step. She ran through darkened hallways, dodging cobwebs and tripping over fallen furniture. She had to escape. She had to find a way out. She had to get out of the house. Desperation fueled her movements as she reached for the door, hoping it would lead to safety.
The whispers and eerie sounds filled the air, adding to the sense of urgency and fear. Sarah knew she had to keep moving or she would be caught.
Her voice trembled. "Who are you?" she demanded. She raised her flashlight, bathing the figure in its beam. Sarah turned to face her pursuer. She had nowhere left to run. Its eyes glowed even brighter. The figure was right behind her. She glanced over her shoulder. Sarah burst out of a room and found herself at the top of the grand staircase. The figure lunged. She had a feeling this was not going to end well. Sarah held her breath.
To be continued.